Ladies and gentlemen, he's back by popular demand on the Sports Report, the #1 global sports show here on Sportinarium. And we had such a good time with him last week, and we had such a good response from last week's interview with him. We decided to have him back on, and have him back on as much as his time allows him to talk all the latest happenings in the world of professional wrestling. And there is a lot to dive into. So there is no better way than to follow up our interview to kick off tonight's show here on Sportinarium with the legendary Arv Mitsu, the first black British boxer to have fought 100 times and co-host of the Spartans Boxing Show. And to talk with our guest by popular demand here on the Sports Report, the #1 global sports show, and that's Wildfire Nate Reese. My friend, welcome back.
Hi, Tom, with a flicker and a flame, just as quick as last week left us. I'm back already, and I can't wait to talk about all the things coming up in wrestling, in particular the pay-per-view this weekend.
Boy, you definitely know what to say when it comes to radio because you had everything planned out. And obviously, it was a tremendous honor to talk with you on last week's show. We couldn't think of no better way to think about Wrestlemania Backlash than talk with somebody like yourself and Wildfire Nate Reese, who knows a thing or two about being in the ring and knows a thing or two about the WWE. And obviously, we're going into Sunday's pay-per-view, Wrestlemania Backlash. And I'm excited about this pay-per-view. I know a lot of people on social media, on Instagram and Twitter, have been giving me a hard time about my excitement and my enthusiasm for this pay-per-view, but it just might just be me because I'm always excited. I'm always enthused about everything, my friend, especially when it comes to the world of professional wrestling and talking with you. And we figured we would definitely kind of go rapid fire, no pun intended. I mean, you're a wildfire, but we figured we would go rapid fire when it comes to WrestleMania Backlash. And there's a lot of matches that we're going to talk about here that I think our worldwide audience listening here on Sportinarium would be very curious, your heartbeat analysis on it. One of those matches that I want to talk about with to start with you is a title match that we haven't covered here on the show, but I'm pretty excited about it for a number of reasons. And that's the Raw Women's title match between Rhea Ripley, who won the title at WrestleMania 37, against Asuka, who held the title for as long as anybody has held that title, as long as anybody has held the title that I can remember it. And Charlotte Flair, who I think that a number of fans would definitely not want to see in this position, but here she is again. She's found a way to find herself in this situation for the women's title, and it's a triple threat. So for our worldwide audience listening here on Sportinarium, Wildfire Nate Reese, your thoughts here between Asuka, the former champion, Charlotte, who always seems to be fighting for the title, and the current champion, Rhea Ripley, and who comes out of it this Sunday on top?
It's quite interesting that already within a month we've got another triple threat match where people are unhappy because somebody else has been put into the match. It's funny how rhythms and things repeat themselves in that sense with wrestling sometimes. But I think what people forget as well is that actually, if you look from sort of the past 18 months, 2 years, they're very much entwined with each other, whether it's Rhea Ripley losing to Charlotte the previous WrestleMania, as you mentioned before with Asuka's title reigns and how long she's held the respective belts. Charlotte beat Asuka at WrestleMania, and then obviously Rhea Ripley's then beaten Asuka last month. So there's still a lot of competitive elements there. They've not had a triple threat match in a sense with each other. I think that Charlotte is in the position that she's in, and there's a very specific reason why. I think they've been smart to channel sort of this initial audience perception of her and be able to create that and have that sort of figurehead, whether it's somebody you want to cheer, whether it's somebody you want to boo, but that's an important, crucial key figure to have within the women's division, particularly as they're hoping to build new stars. Becky Lynch has obviously been away for some time, so to have somebody that's still there and is very much cemented at that figurehead position, which can then, if it is Rhea Ripley beating her, if it's Asuka gaining that sort of almost an underdog win in a sense this time from looking at last week's Raw, there's still a lot of great elements there. Maybe Charlotte comes again to regain that control. I don't think she will. I think it's going to be Rhea Ripley's match, but I think there's a lot more of an interesting array of dynamics than people initially think with that match.
Let me ask you this question. Let's say Rhea retains this on Sunday. Do you see it where we're going to now see see Charlotte versus Rhea for a while because I kind of agree with you. I don't see Asuka coming back so soon and winning the title. And I know that I think the entire internet would probably explode if Charlotte would win here on Sunday. So I think it's kind of clear, although I'm not 100% clear. I give Rhea the edge, but let's say going forward after Backlash, if Rhea retains, do we see this transition to Rhea versus Charlotte?
I would certainly think so. I think for the next few months, they'll continue to work with that. Maybe leading into potentially SummerSlam. I don't know. It's still a good few months away, but I think that's a program that could continue to build up. And that could be a very important program in the terms of building Rhea Ripley in the eyes of the audience. For those that have watched her on NXT, they're probably very familiar with her. Being on Raw for a couple of months now, I think it's quite crucial to help really cement her a little bit like what they're looking to do with Bianca Belair on SmackDown, in the sense of really establishing these newer stars and really helping to build them up to be main eventers. And a sustained run with Charlotte could potentially really help that.
Absolutely. And we can only hope for Rhea's sake that she won't turn into another Nia Jackson, Shayna Baszler. I mean, my God, talk about a team here that for whatever reason can't get out of its own way. And for whatever reason, they can't figure out anything to do with them but give them the tag titles. But that's certainly a topic for another discussion with you. And let me throw out one more scenario here when it comes to the Raw women's title situation. And I'll ask you your thoughts on the SmackDown title match between Bianca and Bayley. Do you see any way that whether it's after Sunday or even down the road that we would see Alexa Bliss reinserted into the women's title picture?
Wrestling, whether she's being a character, being a manager, being in any sort of position, they keep coming back to Bliss. And even if it's not necessarily to have a full sustained run in the ring, they always have a position for her. I think right now it's going to remain in this current position that she's in. Whether she becomes interjected with a storyline and assists somebody else, potentially, I don't think they'll push her in the title picture just yet, but I think there'll always be a position for her, particularly the character that she's portraying right now.
Yeah, because I think she's a wild card, and I think for the first time in a while, we sort of saw her maybe potentially be inserted into the women's title picture. And we know that for the past several months, she's been involved with a storyline with The Fiend, Bray Wyatt, and for a while, Randy Orton. But this was the first time maybe we saw the tease of her breaking away from that. So we'll certainly see how that evolves and how the match on Sunday turns out. And going over to SmackDown, when it comes to the SmackDown title match between Bayley and Bianca, and I don't have much expectations really on who's going to win and who's not going to win, because I think it's a little bit more decisive, I think, on who I expect to win. But I have a good feeling, though, that this is actually going to be a really good match. So for our worldwide audience listening here on Sportinarian, Wildfire Nate Reese, your thoughts on the SmackDown title match between Bianca and Bayley, and who do you think comes out on top with the W?
I think, very much like yourself, I do think it's Bianca's match to win. But one thing that I found when I watched the WrestleMania match with Sasha, particularly with some of the power spots and the gymnastics, I felt Bianca Belair's got a really good niche position that WWE could really focus on, in which they could present her a little bit like the British Bulldog, in the sense of with her being a power lifter as well, some of the strength spots she can use. So she's in a nice position on SmackDown. And you're right, I think it could be a very underrated match. Bayley didn't get to have a match at WrestleMania, so I'm sure she wants to make this as good a match as it can possibly be. I think it'll be a real sleeper match, to be fair. I think people really enjoy good athletic contest. Yeah, a good match to look out for, to be fair, that is on the undercard.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think that this match is actually going to be one of the better matches on the card, because I think Bayley doesn't get the credit that she deserves in the ring. And you got me thinking about my British Bulldog WCW trading card. I know last week we talked about ice cream bars, but now you got me thinking about my British Bulldog 1998 WCW trading card. And when it comes to comparing Bianca, it's a good comparison, because the British Bulldog, I always felt, Wildfire Nate Reese, was always very versatile in the ring. I mean, yes, he was a power guy, but if you go back to the early days with he and the Dynamite Kid, I mean, he was a high flyer. He could do a lot in the ring. I mean, if you look at even when the British Bulldog became a singles wrestler, and all those matches he had with the likes, whether it was Big Daddy Cool Diesel, or whether it was the likes of Vader, or whether it was the likes of Psycho Sid or Sting in WCW, and all those different wrestlers that he had matches with, Shawn Michaels, obviously, his brother-in-law, Bret Hart. British Bulldog could do a lot in the ring. And I think with Bianca, we're going to see her versatility really come into play here. I think that she's going to shine here in this match, and I'm very excited about it. here as well with Bailey to see what she does here in the coming weeks and months. And we are here on the Sports Report, the #1 global sports show, talking all the latest happenings in the world of professional wrestling with Wildfire Nate Reese, one of the top pro wrestling stars, and has done a phenomenal job at representing the business, also with Future Shock Pro Wrestling and a number of different companies, also a longtime friend of the natural born fighter RP Davis. So it's always an honor to speak with the great Wildfire Nate Reese, who's back by popular demand. I am the host of the Sports Report, the Reverend Tom Brice, America's greatest export. We are here on Sportinarium talking Wrestlemania Backlash and who's going to win and some of our thoughts on all these matches here. And Wildfire Nate Reese, I'm not quite sure if I'm excited about this match, which is why I want to talk about it and get it over with and get it out of the way. And that's Damian Priest versus Miz in a lumberjack match. I mean, this is one of these classic matches that I almost think you either put maybe in the middle of the card or right in between the two title matches that we're going to see between Raw and SmackDown, because I kind of think, like, what's the point of this feud? I mean, Bad Bunny has left the WWE to focus back on his music career. I mean, Damian Priest seems like he wins week after week, and I really don't know at this point what this really does for me at this point. I mean, The Miz, I kind of think he lost his luster after he cashed in the Money in the Bank, and he won the championship over Drew McIntyre at Elimination Chamber, and he loses match after match. I think at this point, Wildfire Nate Reese, I'm more excited about watching The Miz in his reality series with his beautiful wife Maurice than seeing him in the ring. So I want to get this out of the way here and get your thoughts on the now lumberjack match between Damian Priest and The Miz.
Okay, you brought up a couple of good points there, and I think the first one is actually, like you mentioned there, Damian Priest is winning match after match after match, which is good. He's, come in very much from the Royal Rumble onwards and has been able to have a steady increase. What a lot of wrestlers don't have, particularly when they make that transition, either as a new superstar coming into WWE or making the transition from NXT, is they tend to get put either very high up on the card and then have quite a steady decline, or they end up stuck somewhere. So for Priest, this match, whilst it may not seem too important right now, it's steady progression. And whilst you've said there, The Miz feels like he's been losing a lot recently. He won the WWE Championship just before WrestleMania. So, he's been affiliated with the main eventers. He's somebody that can get his heat back very, very quickly. And if Priest beats Miz, then he can move on and keep progressing up the card somewhere else. If Miz beats Priest, there's the lumberjacks, there's shenanigans, there's all sorts there. So they could choose to continue that as they want to. But I feel for me in particular, when I was a teenager, my favorite thing was watching all of my favorites, the guys that I really liked, steadily climb up that card, your Jerichos, your Kurt Angles, your Christians, your Edges, and slowly see them go up and up and up the ranks in the right way. And that's what builds that fan rapport. I think if you have a guy that comes in the main event, loses their title match, then drops down the card, that can really significantly damage their perception and their fan base, particularly the mainstream audience that just watch the show week to week. So having that continual momentum and that propulsion towards gaining something new or building up a spot, that's really good for Damian Priest. And I know that the lumberjack match is something that people don't tend to get too excited about, but go back if you've got the network or find the match somewhere, check the Seth Rollins, Dean Ambrose lumberjack match from SummerSlam a few years ago. Nobody expected that to be what it was, and it was a really wild brawl. So who knows what they could come up with, and they could surprise you in a really nice way. Sometimes I really feel that wrestling can sometimes surprise you with matches you don't expect. Ryback versus Kalisto as well a few years ago, that can be one as well. A really sick program match that you just didn't expect to surprise you in the nicest way. So fingers crossed, Tom, stay optimistic.
All right, you sold me a little bit. And when I think of The Miz, the problem I have here is The Miz in a lot of ways reminds me of somebody who actually was one of my favorite wrestlers growing up, and that's Jeff Jarrett, where The Miz is not a bad wrestler. He's always around sort of the upper mid-card, occasionally in the main event, but you really don't want to see him there. You almost don't want to see him win. He's not a bad wrestler. He's a situational guy. You can work him with a different number of guys, and again, like a Jeff Jarrett, but I don't know, I kind of feel like, I tell you the truth, Wildfire Nate Reese, I'm ready to move on with this. I'm ready to move on and see Damian Priest do something else. I'm ready to see The Miz do something else, whether it's just stick onto reality TV or maybe see even he and his partner John Morrison break up or chase the tag team titles or whatever else. I'm just ready to see something else. And speaking of the tag team titles, and that's the SmackDown tag team title match. match, which originally I don't think I was excited for this match, but I'm kind of, after the last couple of weeks on SmackDown, I'm pretty excited to see where this goes. And that's the current champions who've held the titles now for a while, and that's Dolph Ziggler and Robert Roode, and against the Mysterios, Dominic and Rey Mysterio. And obviously the Mysterios, if they accomplish this, will actually be the first father-son duo in WWE history to actually win the tag team titles. And if you think about that, Wildfire Nate Reese, that's a pretty important stat, because you think about some of the father-son combos. You think about, obviously, Dusty and Dustin Rhodes. You think about, obviously, The Rock and his father. You think about Cowboy Bob Orton and Randy Orton. You think about a number of different father-son combos, and this would be a pretty historic thing. So for our worldwide audience listening here on Sportinarium, what do you think happens here in the SmackDown Tag Team title match? And do the Mysterios actually make history here?
Just when you're going through that list then of tag teams of father and son, I had in my head the Chavo Classic and Chavo win the belts, but I don't think they did. And so, no, you're right. And I think they will. I think that it's a match like, again, the WWE loves making history, having those moments. I think Rey Mysterio is probably the right guy to do so. I think maybe something that they could have done at WrestleMania, but they didn't have time, or that match didn't really factor into the main card. I think they missed the WrestleMania moment, to be honest, where they could have had this match, and even if they'd won or lost, what they could have done was they could have had Rey present Dominic with his mask and have that huge moment there of that presentation, and almost introduce him as the next Mysterio, a little bit like Rey's uncle did with him back in the early 90s. I think definitely working towards sort of being the father-son duo. They've had a lot of traction on SmackDown. They've had some good competitive matches. So again, a little bit like Bayley and Bianca Belair, I think it could be a good sleeper match on the card. I'd really like to see this match open the card. I think it'd be a really good one to do so, especially if there's an audience there. It could really help just to bring some energy up. And yeah, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to say that I would love to see father and son tag team, the Mysterios.
Yeah, you know what? I kind of think I see where this is going here. And Roode and Ziggler have been good champions, and I actually think this has given a pretty big jolt to the career of Robert Roode. Because if you think about Robert Roode in the WWE for a while, I mean, he was a guy that came in with a lot of fanfare. We saw all the success that he had in TNA and Impact, and even in NXT, and then came in here to the WWE, and it was pretty much came in with a whimper. I mean, he had very little success, and he wasn't even wrestling here, obviously due to COVID restrictions, everything that's going on in the world. But I think it's given him a pretty good jolt here. And Dolph Ziggler always finds a way to have a title. I think this has done pretty well with them. And I could see them kind of still feuding with the Mysterios for a little while. So I could see this feud going for a while. And I think it throws a bone to Rey, because, you know, we've seen Rey with Dominic now for a while, and it gives them something to have for a while, and maybe even lead eventually down the road to that match, which I think is going to happen at some point between Rey and Dominic. It almost has to happen, that pass the torch match. So I'm going to go out here and agree with you on this one. I kind of think that the Mysterios might pull it out, because it makes sense, unless you're going to pull a heel turn. But I don't see it right now at the moment. I think you give them the titles and let them run for it. I think it still allows Roode and Ziggler to kind of hang around the tag title picture here in SmackDown. So I think that that's what I'm going to go with here when it comes to that. And then another title match that, again, I'm not quite sure what I expect here out of it, but I'd kind of like to see where they're going with it, and that's Sheamus and Humberto. I mean, Sheamus got the title, and I think it was about time that Sheamus got a title, because if you look at Sheamus, you could have arguably have made the case that he was the MVP of Raw, certainly for about 4 or 5 months, especially with his work with Drew McIntyre. So I'm very happy to see Sheamus get a title. But for our worldwide audience listening here on Sportinarium, what's your thoughts here on Sheamus versus Humberto for the U.S. title?
I always find with Sheamus, he's somebody who can sometimes go under the radar in terms of actually how good he is. I think because of people maybe had an initial perception, a little bit like how people do what he put in and what he did to build himself up. And now when you watch any pay-per-view that Sheamus is on or any show, it's a really hard-hitting match. A lot goes on. He does an awful lot of stuff for a big man, and he's quite engaging. He had the match with Riddle, which had a really fantastic finish, where he wiped Riddle's face off his boot last month. I did see the match on Raw with Humberto, and obviously what happened. But again, that could factor into a more engaging match and maybe a different dynamic in this match. Rather than it just being a straightforward title match, they should play up off that. You know, is Humberto 100%? Can he compete in the same way? Does having an injured wing affect his in-ring performance? That's quite an interesting story. And you've got a big bully like Sheamus. That could play a really nice narrative leading into that match. I think it'd be really engaging.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a fun match. I'm probably expecting anywhere between 9 and 12 minutes for a match like this. I think there'll probably be some fun moments. I think it'll be interesting. It'll probably be somewhere between between lower to middle of the card, if I were to guess. But Sheamus definitely deserved the title. I definitely, again, I'm going to stand by my point. I've said this here on different shows over the past few months here on Sportinarium that Sheamus might have been the MVP of Raw. If you think about where he was and how important he was in the card, I really think he did a phenomenal job, and he gave Drew somebody to kind of have some fodder with and a feud with. And it helped Drew, I think, get himself and hang around the title picture even after he lost the title. So I think it was very important, the role that Sheamus played here on Raw. And then going over to SmackDown in the Intercontinental title match between Apollo and Big E. I mean, I kind of like this new Apollo. For whatever reason, Wildfire Nate Reese, at first, I wasn't quite sold on the African accent and this whole new character, but I think it's sort of given a jolt to Apollo Crews, sort of the jolt that we saw in a bit with Robert Roode getting the tag team titles here. So what's your thoughts here on Apollo and Big E when it comes to the IC title?
I think, like you said, I mean, when you first saw the WrestleMania card and you saw Nigerian drum match, it did leave sort of a lot of people wondering what that actually meant. But no, fair play to Apollo. And if you've had a look over the past sort of 18 months, 2 years, they've always got him to a certain point, and it looks like they're going to give him a new nuance or a new twist on his character. And they've just sort of backed away for whatever reason. So the fact that they've gone full steam ahead with it, at least it's motion and it's traction again, like we mentioned with Damian Priest, like with Robert Roode, of these people that come in and don't gain any traction because of what happens to them. The fact that he's taken it and he's moving on is great. General Aziz, it did bring back some fond memories of General Adnan and the whole WrestleMania Hogan versus Slaughter sort of It's cool with me. I mean, those two guys, Big E and Apollo, they never compromise within their matches. They're always willing to put a lot of stuff in it, a lot of high work rate, which is what the IC title was always sort of presented as. I think it's quite interesting to see where it will go from here, because it feels like sort of we're coming towards the end of this sort of feud now, and where does that transition? Because I know they've been very fond of building Big E from November, December time through to this moment, and obviously this is still quite new with Apollo, so it's quite interesting to see what will happen next.
Yeah, I kind of, in a lot of ways, don't see any reason to take the title off Apollo, because I think he's going to be a good champion, an important champion. If you look at the history of the IC title was always an important title and a stepping stone to guys' careers. We saw it, for example, with a Bret Hart. We saw it, for an example, with the Shawn Michaels, or even a Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock, or even with guys like a Chris Jericho, who you pointed out with, or even guys like a Drew McIntyre or a Jeff Jarrett. I mean, there's a long list of great Intercontinental champions. And I think Apollo has the potential here to bring the title back and make it an important title. And I don't really see the reason why to give the title back to Big E, because I think Big E eventually, I think it's going to be down the road, but he's destined for a main event run. He's been a guy in the past that's kind of been on the outskirts of the main event. So I think at this point, I don't see a reason to see the title being taken off of Apollo. So we'll certainly see what happens as we have a few more minutes with Wildfire Nate Reese as we're getting ready for this Sunday's WrestleMania Backlash. And despite what everybody might say on social media, I am very excited for it. I could not think of a better way to be excited about it than talking with one of the top pro wrestling stars around, one of the best wrestlers in the business. That is Wildfire Nate Reese. We are here on Sportinarium. You can follow Sportinarium on Twitter and Instagram at Sportinarium. You can like Sportinarium on Facebook at Sportinarium Media. You can subscribe to the aforementioned Sportinarium YouTube page at Sportinarium TV. And you can listen to 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year worth of Sportinarium content on Sportinarium.com, including the sports report from Friday to Sunday, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern Time and 10 p.m. to 12 a.m. UK time on Sportinarium.com. I want to give a huge shout out to the entire team here at Sportinarium, including Lakey, Arv, Richie, Sean, Steve, Susie, Sasha, Martin, Ryan, our old friend Mike Lipinski, everybody at Sportinarium, Dale, who kicked off Friday's night shows here on Sportinarium with us, and Addie, and everybody at Sportinarium has made us the #1 global sports show. We're talking WrestleMania Backlash with Wildfire Nate Reese, who we know we are going to see him one of these days at WrestleMania, to say the least. And that leaves us then, Wildfire Nate Reese, to the two title matches. And two different ways I think I look at these matches here. And one of them is the triple threat to Raw, and that's Bobby Lashley, Drew McIntyre, and Braun Strowman. And for whatever reason, I'm not as certain on the outcome outcome is this when it comes to the SmackDown match, and we'll get into that here shortly. But when it comes to this, Bobby, I think he'll retain, but call me crazy, Wildfire Nate Reese. It wouldn't surprise me if there's a title change here, because I have to expect there'll be some type of title change here between all of these different title holders. And if you put a gun to my head, I could see, for whatever reason, Drew McIntyre getting this title back again. I'm not sure on it, but the way they've built up Bobby as champion versus Roman as champion makes me lead to believe and lead to the conclusion that Drew could find a way here to somehow pull this out, especially how he lost the title and even how he lost at WrestleMania. So for our worldwide audience listening here on Sportinarium, Wildfire Nate Reese, your thoughts on who comes out on top here this Sunday for the world title on Raw between the current champion, Bobby Lashley, Braun Strowman, and the former champion, Drew McIntyre?
I feel I'm going to ruin the parade a little bit and spoil the party in some ways, because watching those clips back on Raw, there was a really important note from the commentary team where Bobby Lashley had beaten both of them. So again, it made Bobby look strong. Then Drew came in with a Claymore, ready to beat him. Then Strowman came out. And for me, I think there will be a title change. And I'm going to go with Braun Strowman, only because I think that as part of this whole sort of objective that they've done, they've raised Bobby Lashley's stock up huge, helped to make him more of a main event player, that they can put him in main events. MVP's been a great proportion with that. I know you mentioned before that you felt that Sheamus was sort of your MVP of Raw. I think MVP as a manager has been absolutely brilliant for over a year. He's fit a really great role that nobody expects him to fill. I think he's been excellent support for Lashley. I think that, again, it's been really useful to help propel Lashley up the card. I think with Drew, it's all about the title chase now. He had a really strong championship reign for the better part of a year, give or take a few sort of interceptions with Randy Orton. But I think what they'll do is Strowman goes over, leading to Drew chasing for that belt again. Because if Drew just wins now, there's nowhere else really for him to go unless they introduce a brand new challenger, which I don't think they're ready to do so yet. I think you have Strowman take it, then that chase continues. And if you want to add an extra element, make it a fatal four-way, you throw Keith Lee in there, chuck him in as well. Make it a brand new, different version of that too.
You know, you read my mind and you stole my thunder, because Keith Lee, we haven't seen him in a while. And I think the last we saw him, I believe he beat Randy Orton, if I'm not mistaken, or it was one of his last matches. I mean, it was funny because we saw Keith Lee, I think, for one match, and then we didn't see him for like a month. I mean, he's a total wild card here. So that's an interesting name that you've brought up, and I would love to see him back on Raw, and I hope he comes back as soon as possible. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, something tells me that I know everybody would like to see Bobby hang on for a little while, and Bobby has been dominant to say the least, but I just think there's going to be a title change here. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I could see Braun win it, and then Bobby and Drew would continue this feud with him. Or I could even see Bobby still hang on, and then we continue to see these two chase. Or maybe even a Keith Lee gets inserted in it. But something tells me, for whatever reason, either way, Wildfire Nate Reese, there is going to be a title change. I don't know who's going to win it. I certainly like to see Drew win it, but it wouldn't surprise me also if Braun Strowman would win it. But at the same time, listen, Bobby Lashley, I could see him hang on still. I mean, this is a coin toss. That's why I said it before. This is a little bit more uncertain to me. So I think that we're going to definitely see something very interesting happen, to say the least, when it comes to the Raw title match. And then that leaves me here, certainly last but not least, and that's the SmackDown title match with the Universal Champion Roman Reigns against Cesaro. And Cesaro won his opportunity to square off with Roman Reigns by defeating Roman Reigns' old teammate and partner in the Shield, and that's Seth Rollins. But you got to help me and figure this out here, Wildfire Nate Reese. I mean, I love Cesaro. He is a great wrestler, and your tag team partner currently, the Asset Stephen Cross, reminds me in many ways similar to Cesaro. But is it believable that Cesaro could pull this off? Because I look at every title match, and even on the women's side, and it's still somewhat believable that I could see a title change, even Bayley. But I look at Roman Reigns and I look at Cesaro. Roman Reigns has pretty much run roughshod roughshed on the entire SmackDown roster. He simultaneously pinned Daniel Bryan and Edge at WrestleMania. He, for all intents and purposes, kicked out Daniel Bryan out of SmackDown and maybe even the WWE. Kevin Owens, he ran roughshed over him. I mean, does Cesaro have a fighting chance? I mean, for our worldwide audience listening here on Sportarium, help me out here and give us your thoughts on Roman Reigns versus Cesaro this Sunday.
Yeah, I was just smiling then when he mentioned about running roughshod over Kevin Owens. He ran him over with a golf cart.
That's why I said that.
This is it. I think when you take it into account as a one-on-one match, people think that, oh, it'll be one-sided or it's just something where there's a guaranteed victory there. However, there's also a lot of other elements there that could make a really compelling main event in that sense. You've also got the clashes with the Usos. So you've got Jimmy Uso, who's most certainly not acknowledging the head of the table right now. He could be a very, very compelling faction wanting to get back at Roman. You've got Seth Rollins again. You know, obviously Cesaro beat Rollins at WrestleMania. He beat Rollins again to get the #1 contendership spot. But there's still a lot of combustible elements there as well, which could lead to some quite compelling drama there. And also Roman Reigns, again, he's been portrayed that when it's sort of the family that's been involved, like stuff with Jey Uso earlier on, sort of over the course of the past year, that's when he's most distracted. Essentially, you could play up that very much that, you know, you've got this family drama being drawn out, taking his cool stoicism away from him. That's where he's greatly exposed and vulnerable. And Cesaro's strong as well. He's perceived as being stronger, more of a threat, I guess, in some ways, and maybe like Bryan was, although Bryan was an excellent foil for him. And again, Edge has been a really, really good opponent for him. But Cesaro's been there this whole time. People have starting to get behind the fact that he's grinded his way to the top. It's starting to build up. You've got an underdog who's not necessarily an underdog, who's building his way up slowly but surely, and has been getting some big wins and some important things there. You've got this family drama as well that can tear the whole tribal chief and the island apart there too. So you never know what conflicts could happen to really create a compelling main event. So I think there's a lot of elements there that I hope that they can present and make it just a really good roller coaster, and whoever wins. Roman Reigns probably going to win, but I really like the idea of being sort of swerved at every chance that maybe, just maybe, it's not going to quite go to plan for him.
See, I think that this match is going to be the match that I think is going to close the show. And I think that this match, I'm for sure, is going to be a longer match than the Raw title match because of the kind of worker that Cesaro was, and even the kind of worker that Roman is. I think Roman sometimes doesn't get the credit that he deserves in the ring. But if you look at the opponents that Roman has been in the ring with over the past 7 or 8 years, I mean, Roman definitely deserves to be in the discussion as being a great wrestler. So I have a feeling that I could see this match going between 18 and maybe like 21 or 22 minutes main event for the title. In that sense of it, I actually might be looking forward to the SmackDown match just because of the more wrestling that you're going to see. And I think Cesaro, again, he's definitely worthy to be in this position. My only thing, though, is that I don't see any reason to take the title off Roman because I think Roman has really done a great job as champion. I think that you don't take the title off Roman until you have a big event again, whether that's SummerSlam or even next year at WrestleMania. I think it's got to be a big moment when it comes to taking the title off Roman, whereas I look at Bobby, and I think with Bobby, I think you go week to week at this point. I think Bobby has kind of been a tenuous champion, to say the least, and I love Bobby. Do not get me wrong. I loved his work and Impact and TNA, and I loved his first run in the WWE where he was the ECW champion, the US champion, but I just think his title run is a little more tenuous, but we'll certainly see what happens. I'm extremely excited to watch WrestleMania Backlash this coming Sunday, and I'm looking forward to recapping it with you next week, my friend, and talk about all the latest happenings in the world of professional wrestling. And for you, my friend, I want to give you the floor. I want to give you any closing thoughts. I also want you to plug where all of our listeners will keep up to date with all the great things that you are doing alongside the asset Stephen Cross, and who knows, maybe one day with the natural born fighter, RP Davis. So please plug all of your social media again, whether it's Instagram or Facebook, and anything else you're doing you want to update also on, please do. And I can't thank you enough, and I'm looking forward to the future with you. So for you, my friend, the floor is yours, and I can't thank you enough.
No, thanks very much, Tom. In terms of finding me on social media, my Instagram is Nate_Reese_wrestling. And on Facebook, Facebook, you can find me, just type in Wildfire Nate Reese and I'll be there. And yeah, I'm looking forward to not only checking out Wrestlemania Backlash, but in the UK, lockdown restrictions have eased, so I can return to jiu-jitsu. So by this time next week, I'll have gone back and had my first class and taught some students and things. So I'm looking forward to getting back to that martial art discipline in itself and seeing how that can complement my wrestling style moving forward. So I can terrorize Stephen Cross and RP Davis next time we get the chance to
Boy, I cannot wait for that. Boy, music to my ears just even thinking about that. And you got me thinking about Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, who was also great into martial arts. So listen, congratulations, my friend. I'm very excited to hear some progress on that and get a recap on returning to jiu-jitsu. So congratulations. And we're almost there. Listen, I think we're about another 5.5 weeks until we get back to normal in the UK. And in New York, they've pretty much said right around the same timetable. So it's been a long 15 months. I can tell you it feels more like 15 years, but a rising tide lifts all boats. And we definitely know that Wildfire Nate Reese is going to be that rising tide. And the boats of the natural born fighter, RP Davis, and the asset Stephen Cross, you better be prepared because yours is going to be lifted, whether you like it or not, because Wildfire Nate Reese is getting ready to go back out there and practice some jiu-jitsu. And be prepared, my friends. That's all I'm going to say. And I can't thank you enough. I'm looking forward to speaking with you next week. And congratulations on getting back out there in jiu-jitsu.
That sounds great. I think I'm going to have to try and forge some armor now. Just, RP Davis, he's got a good distance on him with that box. So I'm going to go build myself an Iron Man type suit now, just so I can get in and grapple him. But yeah, looking forward to talking about WrestleMania Backlash next week as well. So I'll speak to you really soon.
You got it. As we're here on the Sports Report, the #1 global sports show with Wildfire Nate Reese. As I am America's greatest export fan, host of the Sports Report, the Reverend Tom Brice, and stay tuned for more hard-hitting analysis because the aforementioned Stephen Cross is coming back on here also to talk about WrestleMania Backlash and his thoughts on the Raw and SmackDown title matches, as we were just with Wildfire Nate Reese. And stay tuned here on the Sports Report and on Sportinarium for the asset Stephen Cross to talk more on WrestleMania Backlash here on Sportinarium and on the Sports Report. Ladies and gentlemen, it's always a treat when we get to talk with one of our favorites, as he's quickly become an institution here on the Sports Report and on Sportinarium. And we just heard from his partner here talking about all the latest happenings in the world of professional wrestling, and that's Wildfire Nate Reese. You know, it wouldn't be a Friday, it wouldn't be a weekend here on Sportinarium without him. He's quickly become one of the top wrestling stars around, and as we always say, Cesaro, Seth Rollins, Daniel Bryan, Kenny Omega especially, move on over because we have an asset and his name is the asset Stephen Cross. My friend, welcome back.
Thanks for having me back, Tom. It's great to be back. And those intros, I see you're keeping those up to standard as always.
Well, I've been watching a lot of boxing and a lot of UFC these days. So between Michael Buffer and Bruce Buffer, what I'm actually trying to do now is sort of combine the Michael Buffer boxing side of the intro and then the Bruce Buffer of the UFC intro side of it. So we're trying to combine both. So luckily when it comes to the asset Stephen Cross, you have the perfect name and the perfect nickname that we can actually do both. So we're trying to kill two birds with one stone, as they always say. But there is a lot to talk about, my friend, as another pay-per-view is upon us, and this time it's WrestleMania Backlash. So it sort of combines WrestleMania and it combines Backlash. So this has always been a time of the year that I've always looked forward to here in wrestling because we sort of reset from the whole Survivor Series, Royal Rumble, and I guess you could throw in an Elimination Chamber into WrestleMania to now going into the new year. And we've got two title matches that come across in two different ways. And for our worldwide audience listening here on Sportinarium with you, we've been talking about quite a bit bit over these past few shows, Roman Reigns, and we're going to see him now defend the title on SmackDown against Cesaro. And Cesaro, of course, we've compared you to in the ring, and Cesaro won the opportunity to square off with Roman Reigns against somebody we also talked about, and that's Seth Rollins. Seth Rollins was a partner of Roman Reigns in the Shield. And for our worldwide audience listening here on Sportinarium, the Asset Stephen Cross, your thoughts here on what we can expect this Sunday for the Universal title, Roman Reigns versus Cesaro.
Right, yes. So first of all, I just want to go back to, like you said yourself, I always love this time of year in wrestling. As you say, there's always that what feels like a reset after WrestleMania, but sometimes you also get those feuds and rivalries that carry on. The one that always stands out for me after WrestleMania 2000, where there was the McMahon in every corner and there was the fatal four-way elimination match, and everybody wanted to see Rock and Triple H go at it. So then Backlash the next month with Austin coming back, that was always one I loved growing up. So yeah, I've always loved this time of year. So I'm really looking forward to WrestleMania Backlash. Regarding the Universal title match, so far I've loved the build to this one. I've loved Seth Rollins being involved in it, seeing that anytime you see likes of Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins on the same screen, like the backstage segment they had the other day, I think everyone loves to see the Shield guys together in any form, whether it's against each other or together. Whether they're going to build to those two again down the line facing each other, I don't know. But I think the first thing we can expect is a great match between Reigns and Cesaro, in my opinion. They're bound to have a good match, I think. They're both so good. Both seem to be really comfortable in the roles they're playing at the moment as well. Reigns just gets better and better for me every month in this heel role. Absolutely love him right now. And the Cesaro just seems to be gaining more and more popularity and momentum. It seems really organic as well. It's not like, how can I put it? It's not WWE created. It's organic that the fans have always wanted to see him on top and get title opportunities and be champion and everything. So it comes across really authentic for me. So yeah, I just hope it's a really good match.
I have a very good feeling it's going to be a good match here. But let me ask you this question, because obviously you've been in the ring, you know what it's like to be in big moments. Is Cesaro believable here to win in a spot like this?
I think he's believable, yeah, because he's so good. I think the only thing that will take away from his believability as possibly being champion is all the missed opportunities of the past. Sometimes you've only got to look at the likes of Dolph Ziggler, the way he's been portrayed for so many years. After a while, sometimes people find it hard to suspend their disbelief that they're going to actually come out on top or be champion when they get the opportunity. I think with Cesaro, it's slightly different. I think this storyline, it's really made him come across as a credible threat, especially obviously beating Seth Rollins as well, always helps with that. Whether he does come out with the title or not, I don't think he will. But for me, it's an angle and a storyline that they can actually gain more and more momentum from. If they tease it, but he keeps on coming out on the short end of the stick, whether it be from outside interference and cheating and everything, I feel like that will actually increase the audience's hunger to see him come out on top eventually. So I don't feel that if he does lose on Sunday, that it has to be the end of the angle, personally.
Will Jimmy and Jey Uso take away from his chances and take away from his push against Roman Reigns?
Yeah, I think so.
We're going to certainly see what happens between Roman Reigns and Cesaro, and we'll certainly see if it continues. And I will say one thing, the asset Stephen Cross, Cesaro might be one of those kind of guys that might be better as a champion than a chaser. Sometimes there's certain wrestlers, you look at them and say, oh, they're much better as a chaser than a champion. Daniel Bryan was an example. Stone Cold in his heyday, I always thought was a better chaser than a champion. So there are certain wrestlers that you look at and they are much better chasers than champions. Shawn Michaels was also another example. So we'll certainly see what happens here this Sunday when it comes to Roman Reigns versus Cesaro. And for our worldwide audience listening here on Sportinarium, the asset Stephen Cross, the title match here that I think is a little bit more complicated, and that's over on Raw between Bobby Lashley, who I almost feel like week to week at this point, you're almost wondering on how long is his title reign going to last, against Drew McIntyre, who lost the title in a very bizarre manner when The Miz cashed in on him at the end of the Elimination Chamber, and The Miz held the title, I think, for a day. I mean, was he literally even a 24-hour champion? And then Braun Strowman, who himself was champion last year, and it could go either way, I kind of feel at this point. And this is a storyline here between the three of them where it's going back and forth quite a bit. And I get a feeling that we're going to see this here for a while. And for a worldwide audience listening here on the Sportinarium, what's your thoughts here over on the Raw side of it here in Bobby Lashley versus Drew McIntyre versus Braun Strowman?
Right. So on the Raw side, being completely honest, I haven't seen a great deal of Raw recently. So I've actually, before we come on the air, spent the last few days or so catching up on the last few weeks of Raw TV. I think it's actually quite a good dynamic with the three of them. Obviously, they've interjected Braun Strowman to freshen it up somewhat. One thing that jumped out at me, I was trying to recall when the last time there was a triple threat match, particularly a WWE title match that involved three guys that were so big. Now, obviously, all three of them can work, so that's obviously a good thing, but I can't recall a match with three guys so big in it. Not off the top of my head, anyway.
It's been a while. Yeah, it has definitely been a while. I'm actually thinking about it myself, and I guess it would have to be maybe the days when you had The Undertaker and Kane, and I can't even say Stone Cold would be a big man, quote unquote. I mean, yeah, it's been a long time, which I think also makes this match very intriguing here because unlike Roman and Cesaro, where I don't think it's really believable yet that Cesaro could pull a rabbit out of the hat here and take the title from Roman, but when it comes to Bobby, I mean, listen, it's very believable that Drew, who lost the title in a very hokey fashion, and Braun, who lost the title in his own bizarre fashion when he was champion, I gotta be honest with you, it's very believable here that any of them could beat Bobby Lashley.
Yeah, it's definitely believable. To be honest, any outcome in this match wouldn't surprise me greatly. What I would guess they are doing, and I think this is partly out of hope as well, is that they're going to leave the title on Bobby Lashley and have him be quite a dominant champion and build him up, hopefully, for the day that Brock Lesnar returns. I think a lot of people want to see those two go at it. As I say, a lot of that's out of hope because I love Brock Lesnar. So I'm thinking maybe they'll leave the title on Lashley for quite a while, build him as a credible threat to Lesnar, and then have them two go at it. But at the same time, it wouldn't surprise me one bit if you saw Drew McIntyre come out with the title. Braun Strowman less so. I can't see him coming out on top on Sunday, but it wouldn't surprise me if Drew McIntyre gets the title back, to be honest.
He asked that Stephen Cross. I look at Roman Reigns, and to me, I think the play is to keep the title on Roman as long as possible. And I could even make more of an argument that you'd want to see Brock versus Roman because of the Paul Heyman angle there. Those two have history. And while Bobby has called out Brock Lesnar in the past, and we all want to see that also because of their MMA backgrounds, but something tells me here that with Bobby, I almost have to go week to week with him in terms of how long he's going to hold the title. He has looked dominant as champion, but I kind of feel like he hasn't looked as dominant as Roman, or I feel like with Roman, he's going to be champion. Frankly, listen, I said Stephen Cross, I could see Roman Reigns at this point being champion until next year, because we talked about it over the past few weeks here on the show that the roster on SmackDown, it really is nobody that you can honestly say could go toe-to-toe with Roman. But yet on Raw, I mean, listen, you could play this out for a while between Braun, between Drew. I mean, this could go back and forth for quite a while. In your opinion, can Bobby be built up in the way that Roman has been built up?
I think I'd agree with everything you've just said, to be honest. I think that it maybe is. It's a more of a week-to-week, not so much experiment with Lashley, because obviously he's obviously a credible champion, a credible worker and everything. But I do feel like if for any reason they don't think his run's working out, I'd see them cutting it short. Whereas, as you say, with Reigns being such a dominant champion, I think whatever their plans are for him, they're probably pretty cemented. And if they've got in their head now that he's going to hold the title to next year's WrestleMania, for example, to go against whoever that may be, I can't see them deviating from that path. But like you say, with Lashley, I can see them possibly changing it on a month-to-month basis, depending how it pans out, really, and how well the angles work.
I look at the Raw roster right now, and there's still 5 or 6 guys that could legitimately be a threat to Bobby. I look at SmackDown. I mean, we just talked about it. Cesaro, if he wins, it's WWE, you never know, but you're not really feeling confident that he could pull it out. I look at Raw, on the other hand, again, you got Drew and you got Braun, and they could definitely stack up against Bobby. Now, Bobby, to be fair, has beaten both of them. He beat Drew at WrestleMania, and Bobby did beat Braun on Raw in the past on a few occasions. So, and they've had some history together. So it does make sense that Bobby could hold the title, but it's still believable that Bobby could lose the title. So it's almost a jump ball here. So before I get your closing thoughts here, the Asset Stephen Cross, and we are here on Sportinarium, the #1 global radio station with the Asset Stephen Cross, one of the premier wrestling stars, obviously around. And like we always say, Cesaro, Seth Rollins, Bret Hart, Daniel Bryan, Kenny Omega have nothing on the Asset Stephen Cross. I am the host of the Sports Report, the Reverend Tom Brice. We are here on Sportinarium. Everybody can follow Sportinarium on Twitter and Instagram at Sportinarium. You can like Sportinarium on Facebook at Sportinarium Media. You can subscribe to the Sportinarium YouTube page at Sportinarium TV. You can go to sportinarium.com 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And you listen to the Sports Report from Friday to Sunday, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern Time, 10 p.m. to 12 a.m. UK time here on Sportinarium.com. That's from Friday to Sunday. And yes, it's Stephen Cross. Before we get your closing thoughts here, then, is there anything in particular that you're looking for closely in either the SmackDown title match between Roman and Cesaro or the Raw triple threat title match between Lashley, Drew, and Braun?
With the Universal title match, I'm looking for it to be a really close back and forth one that Cesaro comes out of looking really strong, even if he does come out on the wrong end of the result. But that's what I'd like to see from that one. I think the triple threat one, with it being a triple threat, it's going to be back and forth between all three. It's not going to be dominant. Even if Lashley comes out on top, I don't think he's going to dominate the match, especially the two guys he's going against. So I think that'll be a back and forth kind of it's anyone's to grab kind of scenario. But yeah, the SmackDown one, the Universal title, I'd like to see that match. I'd really like to see Cesaro come out of that looking strong, even if he comes out in defeat.
You think Cesaro gets more time with Roman than, let's say, the Raw match, because Cesaro is such a good worker, and you could maybe see that going, let's say, a few minutes longer than, let's say, the Raw title match?
I would have thought so, yeah, and I definitely hope that's the case. I hope it goes on last as well, and it's the actual main event. And yeah, I should say, because he's such a good worker, it makes the most sense to have that match go on last, and yeah, it should, in theory, go the longest as well, I think.
Well, we cannot wait to see what happens here. We're going to be talking here throughout the weekend when it comes to all the latest happenings with WrestleMania Backlash. There is a lot to talk about it. We're going to talk about it also with Owen Michaels, another pro wrestling star here who's done a lot of great things on behalf of Target Pro Wrestling. So we're looking forward to his hard-hitting analysis here also right after the Asset Stephen Cross. So they're going to be great matches. I'm looking forward to it, even though some people on the Sportinarium family have criticized me on Twitter saying that they're not so excited about WrestleMania Backlash. But I know one thing, I am always excited for professional wrestling, and I am always excited to talk with the Asset Stephen Cross, who is definitely a rising tide that lifts all boats. And for you, my friend, I want to give you the floor. I want to give you any closing thoughts. As always, plug for all of our listeners can get in touch with you and all the great things that you do. So you know the drill, my friend. Plug where a listener can get in touch with you, and the floor is yours.
Right, thanks, Tom. So as always, you can find me on Twitter at the Asset1169, on Instagram at SparkyS316. So that's SPARKYS316. And yeah, closing thoughts, just it's a good weekend, really. I'm looking forward to WrestleMania Backlash on Sunday. And you mentioned MMA earlier, and we've got UFC 262 on Saturday night as well. Well, Sunday morning, as it will be for us in the UK. Charles Oliveira versus Michael Chandler for the lightweight title. So I'm looking forward to that one as well.
Well, you just perked my ears a little bit there. You got my attention because I'm going to be watching that. So maybe next week, in addition to talking some fallout from WrestleMania Backlash, we might have to talk about that main event. So that's very good to know there, my friend. I got a feeling we're going to be talking a little bit of that main event there with Mr. Chandler. So stay tuned for that, ladies and gentlemen. And we do cover MMA here on Sportinarium. So I think that you just caught my attention there. So I think we're going to have to talk about that for a few more minutes on next week's show.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
I'm looking forward to it. And I can't thank you enough, my friend. And thank you for all you do. And we'll be talking then some WWE and some MMA next week. And stay well, my friend, and keep up the good work out there in the ring. And we'll talk with you next week.
Great. Thanks for having me back, Tom.
As we're here on the Sports Report, the #1 global sports show with one of the top wrestlers around. And that's the
I said Steven Crow. As I am America's greatest export, the host of the Sports Report, the Reverend Tom Brice. And stay tuned for more hard-hitting analysis here when it comes to Wrestlemania Backlash and all the latest happenings in the world of professional wrestling with Owen Michaels, who makes his return to the Sports Report and on Sportinarium. And also stay tuned for brand new music. That's right, brand new music from those Frantics and Olivier Laurent as well to follow. So we were just with the asset Stephen Cross to talk the full out for more of the latest happenings in the world of professional wrestling, including the upcoming matches for the Raw and SmackDown titles. And stay tuned for Owen Michaels to talk all the latest happenings here in the world of professional wrestling here on the Sports Report and on Sportinarium.